Welcome, guys. Today we have various topics, about 4 topics we would wish to talk about. I think a lot happened again today, as it always happens. This is Sync 24 TV. This is your host, Kennedy Abongo. Now, the first topic we are going to speak about is of course, the topic of the day. It is the most trending topic, Gachagua impeachment. So basically, we discuss what is going on in court. We provide our analysis. We try to give objective political and legal analysis. So the topic of Gachagua impeachment, I think that would continue to be a hot topic. Then we'd also continue to provide our analysis on it. The next topic we are going to speak about is who will replace Kindiki. There have been talks. We hear a lot of rumors coming around that ODM is pushing for that position. Who will get it? We'll get into that later. And number 3, the topic which we're going to discuss is there a plot to oust or to impeach Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Masika Wetangula? So that one is also a hot topic. It's picking up. I do not know why, but I thought KK government, after the impeachment of Rigathi Gachagua, then it would be much more stable. But these are rumors that are coming around. You get to hear them. So we also delve into that to see, to analyze and to see the veracity of it. And then the last one, which again I find quite interesting, is whether Uhuru and Ruto are coming back together. So the date we are looking for is tomorrow, 26th October 2024. What is going to happen between Uhuru and Ruto? The expectation is they could be coming together or not. So we wait and discuss that as our last topic for this live. Now, before we proceed with the discussion, I would urge you, if you've not subscribed to our channel, do kindly subscribe. Leave a like. Also important for us is that you leave a comment. It is very important. A question, a comment, anything would really appreciate. Now, on Gachagua impeachment, so what happened today basically was the ruling for the application for recusal. So we did discuss the issues yesterday. We discussed the outcome and what it portended for Gachagua himself. We did make, of course, a very wild suggestion that the Kindiki could actually be sworn in, because once the conservatory orders lapsed, there was basically nothing stopping the swearing in of Professor Kindiki. But I think the government or President Ruto felt that it would not be right to take advantage of that leeway to swear in Professor Kindiki, but rather ensure that the process goes to the tail end, so that they don't seem as people who are just being opportunistic and do not consider the rule of law or as something to be beholden by Kenyan. So I think they wanted to avoid a scenario where they would be accused of maybe circumventing or trying to avoid justice. So they've left it for the courts to proceed and hear this application and also the petition as it is. But as of yesterday, those orders lapsed. And you could see Senior Counsel Muite at the tail end of the hearing of the application or submissions by the parties. He had requested court to extend those orders, and the court refused. So basically, today what we have now is the court now came and gave a ruling, and I think it was a good ruling, as we suggested yesterday. Was that there was no way the court was going to recuse itself. The reasons that were given by the parties or the advocates for the deputy president cannot warrant a recusal. So recusal has to be grounded on really serious grounds. It's not just someone is a friend to another. So I don't think they really met those grounds. So then what do we have right now? What we are left with is now the court basically is now is in full control of the whole process. It has now declared itself competent to hear and determine whatever thing that can arise with respect to the petitions that have been filed challenging the impeachment of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. And that's a good thing. I think it is important to consider all these issues, look at them by the court, and also to avoid dragging this matter. The reason why I'm saying it is important that we avoid dragging this matter is because the office of the deputy president is a very, very serious office. It is a very serious office because it is the second most powerful office in Kenya in the executive. So the power that comes with the office of the deputy president, though so many cannot see it, the fact that it deputizes the president shows a lot. And therefore, that office cannot remain vacant for a long time. I don't think the Constitution anticipates a situation where that office would remain vacant for more than 60 days. I do not believe, personally, if I read the Constitution, I really do not believe that the Constitution anticipated a situation where the office would remain vacant for more than 60 days. The reason why I'm arguing like that is because if you read the Constitution, you'd realize in terms of voting or appointment of a replacement of an impeached deputy president, you realize that there are timelines that are placed there. So once the impeachment happens, the president has 14 days to nominate a replacement. So then once the nominee is nominated, in this case it was Kindiki, then parliament has 60 days to vote, to consider and vote on that nominee, whether or not he is suitable for appointment as the deputy president of Kenya. So in terms of those timelines, then you realize that the Constitution really does not anticipate a situation where the office of the deputy president would remain vacant for more than 60 days upon being nominated by the president. So that means that if at all the office has to remain vacant or they have to vote on it, they can reject the nominee and send it back to the president, then the president would nominate another person. So time begins to run again. But the Constitution does not anticipate a situation where a nominee is nominated, voted on by parliament, and then now the office continues to remain vacant. That is very dangerous for the country, because the question that you'd ask as an individual is, what happens now if the president, God forbid, dies? I think this is a question that so many of us, so many of the Kenyan public would wish to have an answer to. The reason why I'm saying this is because you'd find so many people still hold the idea that Rigathi Gachagua is still the deputy president. Others have the idea that we do not have a deputy president. And of course, others also believe now that we have two deputy presidents. So this is a discussion I've had in one of our videos. I would suggest that you go watch that video to see how we explain whether or not we have two deputy presidents, one or none at all. I hope you go watch that particular video. Now, where are we in terms of progressing this matter? The now that the court has dealt with the application challenging their recusal, now what remains is the application by the Attorney General to lift the orders, the conservatory orders. So the conservatory orders is the most important block. It is something that is blocking the government from progressing with the swearing in of Professor Kindiki as the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. So that application will be heard on Tuesday next week. It would be quite interesting to see what they are going to argue about. But from where I sit, in terms of analyzing the whole issue, once you realize the nature of that application or the implication that that it portends when the court allows it, then you'd come to the conclusion that it is very unlikely that the court is going to allow that application. The court would rather fast track the hearing of the petitions that have been filed or the consolidated petitions that have been filed challenging the process rather than lift the conservatory orders and risk, because when the court lifts the conservatory orders, then the government is free to proceed with the swearing in of Professor Kindiki. And when that happens, it would mean that the substratum of the petition or the consolidated petition would no longer be there. So why would people be arguing? Because mainly what they are challenging one, the process of the impeachment, and two, they're challenging the process of appointment by Kindiki. So this is how it is going to work out. When the process of the impeachment is declared to be unconstitutional, then by default, every act that were undertaken as a result of that process cannot bear forth any fruit that can be sustained in a court of law. And that includes the impeachment themselves. So the charges may be valid, but because the process did not follow what the Constitution provides, then basically what we call the means must justify the end. The means have to justify the end, not the end justifying the means. So the means by which they reached that decision have to justify the end result. So that is what we call the process. The process must be constitutional in order for the product to stand the test, the legal or constitutional test. So then, the reason why conservatory orders are there, those conservatory orders preserves the office of the deputy president. They preserve the office of the deputy president so that it is not filled while these petitions are alive in court. And that is very important because that is what we call the substratum of the case. The substratum of the case basically is that office. Once that office is filled, then Rigathi Gachagua would basically lose or would stand prejudiced as a person who is now the former deputy president who seeks to have himself reinstated back to office. So basically, that is where we are in terms of how this petition may go on. So I really don't see a situation where the court is going to allow the application to lift those conservatory orders. But I'm also interested to understand how the respondents, and that is the National Assembly, the Attorney General, and the Senate, are going to argue with respect to lifting those conservatory orders. I would really love to know what kind of arguments they are going to make. And the argument must point to the fact that Rigathi Gachagua is not going to be prejudiced by lifting those conservatory orders. So in terms of what I see, that the argument perhaps that they may make is that the Constitution one does not really anticipate a situation where the country would be at this stage. That is one argument they would make, that it creates uncertainty, and therefore people should be allowed to go on. The swearing in should be allowed to go on, because Rigathi Gachagua could still have his rights under the constitution by payment of damages, something like that, in the event that the court finds that his rights were violated or his right to fair hearing were violated. The danger of that is that once you find that his rights to fair hearing were violated, then it has to follow that the whole process was wrong. And therefore, it would put the court in a very difficult situation, or a precarious situation, where the court may proceed and perhaps make a decision that the despite the fact that his rights were to fair hearing were violated, then it does not rise to the level that one would say that the whole process was unconstitutional. I do not really know how the court is going to make that balance. The more reasonable outcome, that I see is the court insisting or having those orders remain in force, but fast tracking the hearing of the petition. I think at this stage, possibly covered every aspect of it. So if you have a question, or if you have something to add in terms of what the argument I've made, do leave a comment. I would like to know also what you think about this particular topic. Now, the next thing is it's a purely political topic, of course. It's something that is being said around who will replace Professor Kindiki. That is something that I know for a fact is going to happen. One is that Professor Kindiki is going to be the deputy president. I don't foresee a situation where the court is going to reinstate or declare the whole the process unconstitutional. The court would end up holding that the process substantially complied with the constitution. So there is an aspect of substantial compliance with the constitution. So once it finds that there was substantial compliance with the constitution, then there would be no need to hold him. Number two, as you heard about the argument by the court in terms of how you interpret the constitution, and that is a very critical thing. The court did say that you cannot interpret the constitution as any other statute. Interpreting the constitution must take into account non-legal factors. So when the court talks about non-legal factors, that would also entail matters of politics and public interest. So you have to really balance what would be the implication of having a deputy president who is obviously not who is, of course, at variance with his boss, having that particular deputy president back as the deputy president. Who is he really going to deputize? Is he going to serve himself as the deputy president, enjoy the perks, while at the same time use his office to undermine the president? So one thing we have to realize is that as much as we might not like President Ruto, but he is the president, and therefore you cannot, as his number two, however right you are, or however good policies you might present to the public, you might be loved, the people might love you, even might wish you to be the president, but that is not the reality. The reality is that right now we have the president, and that president is President William Ruto, however bad President William Ruto's policies are. So we may disagree with all those things, but the court is not going to fall into that trap of bringing back Gachagua as the deputy president, or holding that the whole process was unconstitutional, because the risk of destabilizing the government is, in that circumstance, is so high, and I don't think the court is going to take that kind of approach. Government has to be stable on some sort, and politics has to be, when government is fighting within itself, it is even more dangerous than when government is fighting with the opposition, because that is more obvious. But when you have two powerful offices, the deputy president and the president, fighting one another, that is something which is not good for the country. And you could see even after, when the deputy president came out of the hostel, the kind of messaging that he gave at that time, that he's the only person in cabinet who can stand up to President Ruto. You see, that kind of talk, those are the kind of talk, when you hear them, you wonder, why then are they together in the first place? Why can't you, as the deputy president, if you feel that the president is doing something wrong, why can't you resign? Because I think that is the most honest thing to do if you are really acting in good faith. So you have to follow through with your values. You have to put your money where your mouth is and resign. And this has happened only once, I think, in our country, when Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, when he fell out with the then president, he decided to resign. So I don't know whether that can happen now, because Kenyan culture is, we do not they don't you don't resign no matter what. So what we are going to see is, we're going to see Kindiki being sworn in. That I'm very sure, 98% sure, that Kindiki is going to be the deputy president. But then who is going to be the CS Interior? Because Kindiki would leave that post open. Now, this is where politics now come into play, because ODM basically helped in the ouster of Rigathi Gachagua. Without ODM, the impeachment fails. So therefore, ODM, with their assistance, would therefore also demand to be rewarded. So the reward, they would push for some more say in government. So they would probably say, this seat that is being left behind by Professor Kindiki should now come to us as a reward for helping in the impeachment process. And sadly, that may be true. So I've heard a lot of these things. I've heard today that they are considering Junet Mohammed as a replacement for Kindiki in that docket. For me, I've never taken someone like Junet Mohammed so seriously, and he should not be entrusted with a serious docket as Interior Ministry. uh, we cannot entrust such a serious docket to a joker like Junaid Mohammed. It cannot make sense. I don't see it happening. It is a rumor that is flying around. And I heard Manduku, while he was addressing, or he was speaking in, I believe it's TV 24, he said they are fronting Junaid Mohammed as a replacement. I don't know where that idea is coming from. Junaid Mohammed should not be given, or should not be anywhere near any ministry for that matter, because I don't see him as a very serious person, who's somebody who can command respect, not for anything, but that is the kind of politician I believe he is. Interior Ministry is a very, very serious ministry. We cannot joke with such a ministry. So if that happens, personally, I would be very disappointed. I would be very disappointed. I'd rather they have someone else, not necessarily from ODM, but someone who is truly qualified. I'd rather they have someone maybe with some military background, somebody who understands issues of security, and who understand better how to combat those security threats. I think for the first time, I would beg the president that if you're going to appoint someone, appoint someone who is really qualified and is in that line. And that is something I think I love with President Uhuru. Most of his appointments, if you looked at them, they were basically, those people were basically suited for their respective ministries. So if it is Junet Mohammed, if that comes to pass, it would really surprise me. I would, it would be a sad day for me. It would be a sad day for our country to have Junet Mohammed as an interior ministry. As of course, there are others who've been given ministries in this Ruto government most of whom I really do not agree with. They are incompetent. They do not know what they are doing. So the only person who is bright, who appears to be bright, is just one person, President Ruto, and of course Kindiki. Kindiki is a very bright individual. I think he'll do well as a deputy president because he doesn't talk too much. Sometimes that is what you need. Sometimes you just need to be that person who doesn't talk too much. Know your place. If you're deputizing someone, do not overreach. You are not a co-president. If you're deputy president, you are not a co-president. You may be the same person in a single ticket. You're elected together, but you have to know you're not the head of the ticket. And I think Kindiki brings that. And I think for stability, perhaps you can try Kindiki so that we see how we've seen how the likes of Ruto act as deputy president. Ruto and Gachagua, those are cut from the same cloth rather. So we've seen how they act when they have such when they're in positions of power, or such as deputy president. They tend not to keep silent. They can't be really be comfortable as number two, so they would want to destabilize the situation. It is sad that Ruto did that to Uhuru Kenyatta, and he couldn't take it when Rigathi Gachagua did it for him. On to our next topic. This is quite an interesting one. Why? It's just a lot. I don't know whether there are rumors, but yet they're quite interesting if you look at them, because they prop up and you think, first of all, they're rumors, and then you hear people starting to pick them up, and before you know it, it is actually happening. Do they really want to oust Wetangula from the speakership? It's like they really want to remove him. So I believe for many of you, when the impeachment of Rigathi Gachagua, when it is something that started off as a rumor, it started off as a rumor, and then when it picked up so suddenly, and before we knew it, it was out. So you see some of these rumors in politics, it is like somebody just lights a fire and then a smoke just to see how are people reacting to this idea. How are people reacting to this idea? And then before you know it, they are acting on it. It is moved so fast, you are left in the wake of what is happening. You're like, what is really going on in this country? So who could have imagined that 2 years down the line, we won't have Rigathi Gachagua as the deputy president? Nobody. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that this. I'm taking it with a pinch of salt, the Wetangula issue, but it is really picking up. It is really picking up. I think somebody is toying with that idea, and the reason why they are toying with it is this. The argument is that because we helped you, it's mainly coming from ODM, because some people are saying, no, it's a way of rewarding ODM so that they take the speakership of the House. So they would basically be heading one arm of the government. So one, the speaker should be neutral and should not belong to any party. That is how it should be. But again, you cannot, when you give it, the person I hear they want to give it to is Otiende. Otiende is ODM, like basically he's an ODM person. So if you give it to Otiende Amolo, you'd basically be giving it to ODM. So I hear this thing that they want to replace Speaker Wetangula. How true do I think with? If it is ODM, I think they're doing it to see how they can improve their negotiating. Sorry, my law. Their negotiating position with Ruto. So I really don't think that they're going to replace Speaker Wetangula. He did quite well for Ruto in the impeachment of Rigathi Gachagua. I was quite happy, was enjoying the situation, and I think he loves power. Number two, I really don't think Ruto is that kind of a person like Raila. You see, Raila did give Wetangula Speaker the minority the minority leadership in the House, but now at some point decided to, Senate minority leader, and then at some point decided to remove him and replace him with Orengo. And I think that is the point when he lost the election, because Bukusu, the Bungoma people, just went and voted for Ruto. It was a big mistake. I don't think Ruto can make that mistake. The the backing that Wetangula has. By the way, so many people are saying that the Kikuyu community or the Mount Kenya vote is what gave Ruto, the state house and all that. But if you consider it actually critically, then you realize it was Bungoma. It was Bungoma, because if you remove Bungoma, because you see Bungoma, they were going to vote. The Mount Kenya region was going to vote for Ruto no matter what. I believe they were going to vote for Ruto no matter what. Bungoma people were going to follow Wetangula. And that has always been, they were going to follow Wetangula. So the person who actually delivered this presidency for Ruto was Wetangula. All the votes, I was so surprised. The moment I saw how that the voting pattern coming from Bungoma, I knew, no, this is a toss. It's gone. It's gone forever. So I don't think Ruto is going to make the mistake of replacing Wetangula with ODM. So does that mean that he may not try? He may try, but does he trust that ODM would support him in 2027? That's another question. So it is more complex than you realize. So you have to make those political calculations and see Otiende Amolo. I don't think it's going to happen. So, but we wait. You never say never. Now, on to our last issue. Uhuru and Ruto. Uhuru and Ruto. I think these are buddies, and I always believe that politics, if you've been in politics long enough, then you realize there are no enemies in politics. Politics is about interest. What can I get from you? What can I give you in return? So basically, it's a quid pro quo. Scratch my back, I scratch yours. And everybody's back is itching in politics. So everybody would need somebody to scratch their back. So you get into politics, you have to have somebody who's going to scratch your back. And you're also going to scratch somebody else's back. So that is how politics works. And then these interests are more volatile. They change like every day, and they change so fast. So I'm not really surprised to hear that Uhuru and Ruto may share a platform in Nyeri tomorrow, that is Saturday. I'm not also sure whether that is true, because considering the former president is out of the country in Liberia, I believe, for some AU engagements. But nonetheless, if that is going to happen, I hear somebody termed it a Madeira declaration. I don't know what kind of declaration that one is going to be, but it would be quite interesting to see that kind of reunion in Madeira, where the former deputy president Rigathi Gachagua comes from. It would be like, a slap in the face of Rigathi Gachagua, because Rigathi Gachagua spent much of his time attacking the former president Uhuru Kenyatta, and he was used quite well by Ruto to do that. It was quite sad. That somebody who harbored political dreams would go so hard on a member of his community, and not only a member of his community, but somebody who also had tremendous support, somebody at the level of President Uhuru Kenyatta. So right now you see him really struggling with the issue, trying to have President Uhuru Kenyatta back him, and also to come out to support him, to the point of even not saying that is the deputy, is the kingpin of Mount Kenya. He said, no, so long as Uhuru Kenyatta is alive, he's still the kingpin. So he's trying to endear himself to Uhuru Kenyatta so that he can have a footing because it doesn't have any political foot soldiers, serious political foot soldiers that can help stand up to these political bigwigs. Because if Uhuru really comes out and backs Rigathi Gachagua as the kingpin of the Kikuyu community or the Mount Kenya region, then I think it could also complicate issues for Kindiki's political ambitions. I'm saying this because once you're a deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, and if he serves for the rest of the term, then the only place you can go is up. You can't come down. The only place you go is up. You can't now, be appointed some other thing. So you remember Kalonzo Musyoka, there was this agreement, I believe, between the Azimio agreement where they were saying Kalonzo would be the speaker of the National Assembly or the Senate, something like that. And he rubbished it because really he's been the vice president of the Republic of Kenya. Why do you want to be the speaker of the Senate or the National Assembly? So I'm not saying that those positions are smaller positions, because again, you had an arm of government, I think, but a deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, that comes with really something. You're basically a president in waiting. So once you're a deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, you can only go up. So the appointment of Kindiki will also be a platform for him to use or activate support across Mount Kenya. One, he has to ensure that is accepted by the people of Mount Kenya, both the Kikuyus, the Ameru, and the Embus. And it is going to be very difficult. The reason why it is going to be very difficult, one, it comes from a very smaller community compared to the Kikuyu community. So we've removed a Kikuyu and replaced him with a Meru. So how are the Kikuyus going to view him? One, if you look at the larger group, the class, we call it Gema. If you look at Gema, one, they would say, when your brother is being crucified, then you are actually coming on board to help crucify him. We do not, because there was this talk among the general public from Mount Kenya, the common wananchi. They said, we do not want the deputy president slot. Give it to whoever you want, but don't give it to us. Okay? So when you give it back to them, they won't hate they would hate the person who's been given that position, because they would see you as a betrayer. So Kindiki has work to do. One, he has to ensure that the president's lost support in Mount Kenya is cultivated. President now, it would mean that is the senior most politician coming from Mount Kenya region. By default, then he is the kingpin, because he's still the one who is now active in politics. Considering Uhuru Kenyatta retired, there's nothing much really Uhuru Kenyatta can do at this point. He's gone. So people can say, no, he still has sway here and there. I do not dispute that. He may have sway here and there, but if you're looking for a true kingpin, somebody they are going to look at, or they are making somebody they would want for the new future, in future, then it can only be Rigathi Gachagua and some other person. So Kindiki has really to grow into that role. He has to grow into that role and become now a true politician. Kindiki is more of I don't consider him so much of a typical politician. And mostly such people actually end up becoming presidents. Before you know it, who really knew Uhuru would be president? And he made a very good president, I think. He had his weaknesses as president, but in terms of handling serious situations, in terms of compassion, in terms of showing that he cared, I've never seen any president I've seen 3 presidents. I think now 4. I've seen Moi, I've seen Kibaki, I've seen Uhuru, and now I've seen Ruto. But if you compare these presidents in terms of compassion, in terms of the feel of a president, somebody who really brought the presidency back to the people, and you could feel that presidency, because initially the president was something which was so far from the people. Uhuru Kenyatta brought it down here. You'd experience the presidency somehow, So there is that aura that it comes. People exercise power. So for him, power was not really much of an issue. So it's like he was really trained to handle himself. So he knew how to deal with the issue. It didn't scare him. So if you compare him and Rigathi Gachagua, they're two very different people. You see how Rigathi Gachagua handled power. He would talk, sometimes his talks, which are very, very divisive talks, he would spew some things you wonder, is this really a deputy president talking? So Uhuru Kenyatta had that aura. And if you compare him with Ruto, I feel Uhuru is really more presidential. If you compare him again with somebody like Kibaki, Kibaki did quite well economically, but Kibaki was more hands off. It's like just hands off, which was a good thing in terms of administering the government and ensuring that the government works seamlessly. He did not interfere so much with institutions, so he just left everything to work. He just put in a really proper framework. But it was a presidency where you could feel the president was just so far up, you couldn't reach him. But then comes Uhuru Kenyatta, who made you feel like the president is just something you could aspire to, and you could feel, and the care that he showed when he was handling some situations. Sometimes you go back and you watch those videos of Uhuru Kenyatta, and then you realize, Jesus Christ, we had a really good president. At least he cared. But nobody's ever perfect. So it wasn't perfect. Then Ruto came in. So of course, if they come together, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, it would be a very big game changer. Because then if they come together, that would mean Uhuru Kenyatta would be fully be in Kindiki's corner. If that happens, I think it would happen so as to assuage the people of Mount Kenya and to help them heal from this perceived betrayal, and to reassure them that nothing is lost, that we still have one of our own in government, and that person is still number two. We are still protected, and something like that. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. If Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto would have a handshake, that would be a game changer. I think that would be a really great game changer, even more than what Ruto and Raila have done. Because you see, but I don't see Uhuru doing it. I sincerely don't see Uhuru doing it. He just left. He just said no. I'm doing my thing. You guys do yours. Run your government the way you want. I'm not going to speak. So he's been completely out. He's just doing it, traveling the world, doing his engagements, official engagements, without really interfering. He doesn't even make statement. I think he did once for the Gen Zs, which was a good thing. Sometimes you'd wish to hear the voice of Uhuru Kenyatta speak to such issues. It reassures the public. But if it can really come together, then it would be, like that would be the original ODM back together. The 2000 and is it 2005 ODM back together. The orange versus banana, basically, because that we had Uhuru, we had Raila, we had Ruto, we had Mudavadi, we had Balala. I don't know where Balala is. Perhaps they'll bring him back. So basically, all these people, if they come together, that would be a really big game changer. So I'm looking forward to Saturday to see what happens. Now, guys, that would mark the end of our live today. I hope you've enjoyed. Leave a comment if you must. And if you're watching us for the first time, do kindly also leave a like. Thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend.